I think we are live.
We are live. Chris, I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm very excited to be here with you. Let's get going with a very short and hopefully useful session around lessons from the pandemic pivot. Before we go on to that, though, I'm going to pass across to my friend Summer just to do an acknowledgement of country.
So Chris and I are presenting today in Melbourne, and we would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And we also pay our respects to elders of the lands in which you are learning from today. We'd love to know where you're learning from, so please do feel free to put that in the chat.
And thank you for pointing out the chat. It is there for you to chat in and ask questions. Please do jump in there, and we're excited to answer those questions. And we would like to take a moment to acknowledge you as well, and the fact that you've given up your time this afternoon to hang out with us and to explore together a little bit this pivot from the pandemic. So, I mean, some people, many people indeed, somewhere will have no idea who we are. So maybe we should do a little intro. So if I could introduce my amazing friend, Summer Howarth, who is a teacher. She's worked with organizations like AITSL, she's worked internationally, and she's done some amazing work with learning design and event design and learning events. But I also think the most impressive thing about Summer, and the story I love to tell about her, is some of the work that she's doing up in the Northern Territory with young people and teachers and educators, and also government in the Northern Territory to improve learning by having student voice at the heart of everything they do there. And she has done an incredible job of continuing that work, even though we are not able to be there at the moment. So I'd like to introduce my friend Summer, who is amazing, and you can follow her on @edusum.
Thank you, Chris. And I want to introduce my fabulous friend, Chris Harte. Chris is the founder and director of Unstuck Learning. Chris has been an award-winning, or continues to be an award-winning educator, very much as well, someone who is big in the design space. And Chris has successfully worked with big organizations, including Google, but also across states and territories in all different schools and sectors as well. Chris has been doing some remote professional learning for the likes of ISV. He has been working with teams to pivot their concepts of remote learning as well. Chris was a co-designer and co-founder of Emerging Sciences Victoria. So some of Chris's projects are very, very well known to a lot of you, and you might not even be aware that he is behind them. So follow along, see Harte or Chart on Twitter. Chris and I have worked together doing lots and lots of learning design. And what we've done here is take what we've both been doing in our organisations, stories from our friends who are teachers, they're the best of people, to share what we're doing here with you today. So Chris, it's a pleasure to be presenting with you today.
Absolutely, and you, my friend. I won that award in 2004, so I really need to retire it at some point. Anyway,
No.
We are 1.5 meters at least apart. I think we're probably near the 20 kilometers apart. What we are going to just look at very shortly, and someone's going to take us through, is what we value at the moment during this pandemic pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. The big idea that perfection is out, when we're not interested in that, but getting less wrong is in. So there is nobody out there that has the answers. There's a lot of noise out there. This is the how-to, this is how you do it. No one knows. If they're saying that, it's selling you snake oil. What we're here to do is to try and look at what the best of what is happening at the moment, try and distill those into some practices that we might be able to share. That sharing, learning is caring, maybe not drinks or handshakes at this particular period of time, but if something is making some headways into learning for your students or perhaps efficiencies for your staff, get it out there, share it. And we know that there are no answers yet, but there's lots of examples of great practice. So we, again, in whole, really value done is better than perfect, push it out there, and let's all see if we can adapt practice.
Absolutely. And I think being in both of us in Victoria, we realize that the pandemic isn't a blip. It's something that's going to be with us for a little while. So I think we really need to adopt these while we're designing great learning. So tell me about why we're having a design clinic.
Well, we're having a design clinic because it's a really great way for us to really consider some of the principles and practices behind how we design, and also thinking about how we can get all of the different ingredients through strategies and frameworks and practices and policies and put them together in something that is actually really digestible. So when we think about our dumpling analogy, something that's incredibly simple, desirable, you know, something that we all crave from time to time. I mean, there's a lot of things that are stuffed into that little dumpling there. That happens a lot when we're talking about design in schools. You know, there's a lot of great practices that actually have a lot of different things embedded in them. So today we have actually taken the best of high impact practices. We've taken all sorts of practice principles. We've looked nationwide at all sorts of frameworks and strategies, and we've really distilled it into a really nice set of workable principles. And that's what we love about design. It's making the complex really simple and accessible.
And you are making me hungry by showing me those delicious looking pot sticker dumplings. What we do want to just set up for you and for all of us, I think, is this idea is what were our biggest design challenges this year? And that's what we're going to focus on for the next 20 minutes or so, because we're really passionate about learning for young people and working with educators to support them in the amazing work they do. And we have all been smacked with these huge design challenges. And there are lots of solutions that people are putting out there, and do this and do that and buy this thing and do that thing. Yep. But really what we want you to think about is, in your context, what are the design challenges? Because in fact, every single school, every single educator, every single child is unique. And so our design challenges are always going to be slightly different. So one of the things that Summer and I love doing is developing empathy with organizations that we work with and schools and teachers that we work with, because we know that to design great learning, we absolutely need to understand our people. So if you're an educator watching this, it's about knowing the kids, which you do so well, especially when they're with you in school and you can get those moments of connection. Maybe even more challenging now. And for leaders, maybe getting to know, really trying to understand what's going on for your teachers and your communities. Because what we often do is, as designers of learning, as leaders of schools and educators, is we will design something we think works. And the way we do that is we'll think, right, what do we think is really important? And so this beautiful picture, which a good friend of mine from university, Rosie Brooks, so we used to live right next door to each other at uni and college. She is at Rosie Brooks Pics on Twitter, by the way. She does all of my paintings for any kind of presentations I do. And she did this one for me, which I absolutely love. And the idea that you've got a family here, the parents are kind of looking at a mobile for a child and saying, what a beautiful mobile, what great parents we are. We've got color, we've got animals, we've got like music happening and it's moving. And from their perspective, what they have designed in this experience for the baby is great and really powerful. But as soon as you step into someone else's shoes and look through their perspective, or in this case, into the baby grow of another human, and look at what they see, then you might see a beautiful musical mobile, but really all the baby is seeing is a lot of animal bums, which isn't probably the impact or the effect that you intended to create. So what we want to really encourage us to do, all as educators, is to share as widely as we can, to take ideas from each other, but to listen to our learners and to listen to our communities to implement those ideas in a way which is meaningful to them.
So I think one of the biggest design challenges, certainly that I've seen teachers encounter, and from my work deeply in schools and alongside teachers, has really been that, how do we tap into that kind of student voice? How do we know what their experience is when they're from home? So one of the ways I know some clever teachers were actually shadowing students across all of their classes, whether they were going into Zoom or otherwise, to get that experience of some of their fatigue. It really helped in some of those design challenges. So that is a way that you might be able to build empathy as well. I love that analogy of what we're seeing with the animal bums. It just makes me think all the time, what's the perspective of somebody else? So Chris, we've really had a look at distilling down some of these concepts into really big parameters for those design challenges. And I've asked people to share what your design challenges are in the chat as well, so we can start to get a little bit of that cross-pollination there. But we reckon there's two, and the first one is the social and emotional well-being of the school community. Pivot Surveys did an amazing study and survey of tens of thousands of teachers, and all of them said they were really concerned with particularly the well-being of self and students. So that's parameter one. What's parameter two, Chris?
So the second design parameter is, social and emotional well-being at the heart of what we do, but also ensuring that we do have, did you see how I was just getting some time there because my clicker wasn't working?
I really like what you're doing.
And the second parameter, he says, falling off his chair, is continuity of learning on the home campus. And the home campus is is a term that I first heard used by friends of ours at the Knox School in Melbourne who have used that term for learning off-site. So this idea of what is the home, this is the school campus, what is the home campus? And we're going to explore this in a second, but it's very, very different for every single child. So parameter 1, looking at social and emotional well-being, and parameter 2, looking at continuity of learning on the home campus, whatever that might look like.
Nice. I really like what we've got coming up here, really looking at that concept of the home campus and how we can actually have a tool to start to make some reflections, maybe some judgments. Again, when we are designing, we want to gather as much information and intel as we can. We want to spend more time understanding the problem than actually solving it. So thinking about these variables, Chris, we know when we're on campus, there's a lot that we can control, and there's just different levels of control when we're at the home campus.
So the first one, when we're looking at the home campus variables, and this kind of what are they called? Spectrum on the side, I guess,
yeah.
is it might be around a safe learning space. So this idea of having a safe learning space at home, and that might be a physically safe space, but also a safe learning space in the sense that a space where a child can have time, have quiet, isn't having to look after siblings, and can actually spend some time focused in on their learning. And for some children, they don't have that at all. And other children might be really lucky and they've got their own learning space at home. But in the past, this variable we've been able to control because when the kids come into school, we make sure they've got a safe learning space, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's in a learning space around the school. So there's something around thinking about these variables and the way they change at the moment.
I really also like that thought, Chris, that it does make us reflect on our on-campus learning as well, our school campus variable. You know, do we assume that we are providing a safe learning space? It's a nice reflection. Access to tech and resources has been an interesting one, and I know you've got a particular story to share around that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're going to tell you some stories around this piece of tech and resources shortly, because we know that there's an assumption that you can go to online learning, and there are lots of assumptions within that. And for some children, that access to technology is really, really low, and access to Wi-Fi and things like that. And some children, again, they're very lucky and they might have a device. So there's another real variable in there, and we're going to unpack those stories a little bit shortly.
Nice. In terms of the support as well, there's lots of sort of human resources and supports that we can provide in a school campus, you know, and with home that might be varied as well. Certainly there's different ways to access that support. So this one becomes something that we need to consider from student to student and situation to situation. Feedback's a really, really interesting one. We have found with some of the work that I've been doing with Camberwell Girls Grammar, for example, we've actually been able to open up feedback to far more amount of professionals, or a range of professionals and teachers per student as well. So whereas maybe on the school campus it might be limited to one or a small group of teachers, we're actually finding, because of the parameters of how we present work, we're able to provide feedback in different ways. This is just a little tool to make us consider those variables on that sliding scale a lot more when we're designing.
Absolutely. And so just to bring this kind of round this off around the variables, is for those pink triangles there, the settings could be at 0 for some children on all of those different variables. And by the way, these aren't all of the variables we think, these are just some of the key ones we wanted to pull out. Or it might be that they're at 10 for these variables. But the challenge is that when we were in school all of the time, and I know that in Melbourne that's not happening at the moment, I know in other states it is happening, but when we're in school, or we want this more blended approach to learning, we can control these, but for each individual child now, they could be very, very different. So it really raises a challenge for educators designing learning around these variables. Just before we move on, can I just encourage anyone who wants to jump in the chat? Jenny Lewis is winning because she got first into the chat, so well done, Jenny.
There's a lot of people that are actually in the Zoom chat, Chris, which I'm monitoring as well. So I think that's where most of the conversation is happening.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just look at a couple of models around that we've seen. And these are kind of a spectrum of models around different types of school at the moment, especially in that time of the pandemic pivot. And we've gone back to that, as I said, in Melbourne metropolitan area. There are some schools who were in a position where they were able to essentially go school online. So kind of business as usual. If you have French on a Monday morning at 9 a.m., then you're going to have online French at a Monday morning at 9 a.m. in technology. So whether using Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams or whatever learning platform you've got, it's business as usual. And so some schools and some kids were able to do that, especially where there'd been a lot of technology use in school anyway. The flip side of that was total school offline, very asynchronous and potentially little technology. And there are lots of schools which we know are working with communities where access to technology at home is very, very limited. And there are some amazing stories of schools taking packets of learning materials and dice and coloring pencils and all those kind of things, and literally either having drive-through at school, which is one of the schools I was doing some work with, which was amazing, or actually going and dropping these packets of learning off. So that kind of school offline. Now, there are pros and cons to all of these, and we're not here to judge any of them. We're just saying that these are where they are. There is another model which is really interesting, which is the one where people have been trying to reimagine school. And there have been some really great examples, Pran High School down here in Melbourne, the Knox School, and a bunch of other schools that we know have really tried to reimagine, okay, we're in this pretty icky situation. What can we do differently? And so we're looking at blended learning and flexible technology, having, the asynchronous, synchronous times differently managed. So big chunks of asynchronous learning for students where they're self-regulating, self-managing, controlling their own learning, but really in something like the 2-1-2 model, which is a model that a number of schools have adopted, of things like on a Monday and Tuesday, on the first 2 days of the week, it might be quite intensive input from teachers. On that middle day, on the Wednesday, lots of schools are doing well-being Wednesday. So actually focusing on well-being, focusing on teacher well-being and student well-being, giving teachers a chance to not have face-to-face or online lessons, but actually have some time to work on the things they need to, and for kids to explore passion projects or sport and well-being. And then those next 2 days in the 2-1-2 model, really focusing in on small group seminar style, while other kids are working asynchronously. So really playing with some of those variables like timetables, for example, because our school timetable suits us to an extent. I hate timetables, but anyway, our school timetable suits us to an extent when we're in school. You know how I feel about timetables.
I know.
But suddenly we've got, hundreds of different timetables happening in houses or in this home campus.
It's so interesting, isn't it, to be able to think around the timetable and actually reconstructing that in the personalization of the timetable, and, kitchen as makerspace, and that whole idea of the home campus then opens us up to all sorts of design parameters. So
what we're going to do, and I'm not sure, Summer and I might do this really quickly. We'll probably only spend about 30 seconds on this quick activity.
It's pretty fun though. It's pretty fun.
It's amazingly fun. We're going to recommend that people put this in the chat, and I think you might be seeing a different chat to me, which is exciting.
I am. I'm seeing the exciting chat.
Oh my God, there's so much chat happening in the other place where I wasn't looking.
Welcome to the chat.
Oh my, I feel like I've been left out. Andrew, Adriano, Jesla, they're all there.
Jim,
they're all there.
If we think about this idea of, we are all designers, it's just looking at something that is existing and ordinary and reconsidering it through different eyes. So we'll model it. You pop it in the chat as well. Chris, I want you to think of, between us, 10 new ways that we can repurpose a paper clip. A paper clip says what it is in the name. Let's give it another purpose.
Get a SIM card out of your phone.
Cool. I'm going to use it as a hair clip to keep my hair off my face.
I'm going to use it to scratch my ear, which is very dangerous and you shouldn't do it at home.
Yes, and I'm going to use it as, oh God.
You're rubbish at this, come on.
I'm going to use it with a little sponge to really clean in behind my toilet.
Right, make a replacement spring, hold my skirt together when the zip breaks, make a necklace, make a bookmark. I stole Jamie, pick a lock, a nail cleaning tool. They're on fire. Make love heart jewelry as a marker in my crochet work. I love it. Use it up as it. Money clip, I haven't got, money clip. There we go, brilliant. Fix my glasses. Patterns in pastry pies. I can't stop.
Oh my God. This is the whole thing around us now reconsidering. So we can look at curriculum that exists, we can look at timetable, we can look at all of those existing things and go, all right, let's think of this through a designer's eye. But one thing that we do need to do with a designer's eye is really look at design principles, which is something that we have now had a look at all of those research and framework. We've looked at our 2 parameters and we've really distilled it into design principles. You would have seen a piece from Camberwell Girls Grammar they put out on Twitter that was design principles for online learning. These are almost like some calibration points that just really help us to design wisely. So Chris, let's have a look at the first 2. What are the first couple?
So the reason we've got these this little bit of iconography on the side there is we've broken down these 10 design principles into 2 blocks. So the first block of 4 is around that, our very first parameter around well-being and social and emotional learning. And then the next block of 6 is really along that continuity of learning in the home campus. So when we're designing, we are designing for several things. The first thing is kindness. Like, we think that's so important right now, especially in the pandemic pivot, that we are designing learning which is kind to you and kind to your learners. That we're looking at social, emotional well-being as the absolute core of what we're doing, because at the moment, we just had loads of fun with the paperclip thing, but the whole piece around it is stressful at the moment, and there's no denying that. And we're moving to masks in Melbourne tomorrow, and lots of people are already there. And so the social and emotional well-being piece is so key, because without it, kids can't learn. If they're not feeling safe, if they're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, they can't learn. As teachers can't learn. We are pretty superhuman, but we're not invincible. So I think it's really important that we look at that. And so we've got 2 more for the social and emotional well-being.
Yeah, so the big one is we design for connection, and that can not just mean having really good broadband and Wi-Fi, but we're actually looking at how we can design for connection together and connection to content, connection to purpose and self. And also, importantly, the moments of levity, joy, and wonder. It's so important for us to be able to design for engagement very specifically. When we say design, we're sort of saying on purpose. We're trying to take that kind of accidental piece out of it. So there are 2 others that are really important for that parameter 1. So when we start to look at the home campus, we've got 6 design principles for this one.
Absolutely. And the first one that we've got up here is transparency of the why, the what, and the how. And I think this is really such an important piece for us when we're looking at designing learning for the home campus, where maybe we're not in a learning space with our young people, and we need them to understand their learning journey much more. And this is, I'm trying not to throw around cliche terms like a learning journey, but they really need to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it, because maybe you're not there to just walk up to them and point at something or whisper in the ear and say, oh, you should be trying to do this thing now. They're kind of stepping into this self-regulatory space. So helping them by being super transparent about what they're going to be doing with really specific and measurable outcomes. And I don't mean, OKRs and targets and all that kind of stuff. I really mean that the students can see their learning growth because you've been specific and measurable in what your expectations and co-designed expectations are around their learning growth. And the next one is actually looking at phases of learning. And we call this phases of learning, right? So it might be a learning and teaching model. So within Victorian public schools, we have a Victorian learning and teaching model. But really what we're saying is, and we're going to explore this in a little bit more detail in a second, whether it's synchronous, whether it's asynchronous, or whether it's blended, what are those phases of learning that you cannot miss out when you're designing learning? And we're going to look at that in just a moment in more detail.
Yeah, it's a really great model that you've got to share as well. The important ones is the equity of access. How can we be really intentional in our learning design to make sure that everybody has that equality of opportunity to be successful in the learning? And also the multiple pathways. So we know that there's different ways of getting to point A to point B. Essentially, we're designing for personalization and choice here. So it's really, really a great opportunity for us to be able to think a little bit creatively about how to get to point A, point B, or as Andrew Hiskins has said, point C, of course, wherever the learner wants to get to.
And I think that's such a great point, and thanks for adding that in, Andrew, because it really is in the past where we have had the locus of control sitting so much more with the teacher in the room. The idea of that locus of control, not through any choice of our own necessarily, has in fact been distributed out to learners in home campus situations. So our last 2, which kind of link very strongly to that, are learner agency. And that idea of designing for learner agency. And again, it's not through any choice of our own. A lot of us as teachers, and I know I've definitely want to help kids, and sometimes too much. we kind of want to be there going, no, come on, we're not going to let you fail. I'm going to make sure you get this. And I'm going to drag you through this bit of learning. And this idea around learner agency is we're going to give you choice. We're going to give you voice in code construction, code design. But really, it's also about responsibility for a learner. And I've seen in my own 15-year-old son, his level of responsibility for his own learning has shot through the roof. He no longer sits there with his hand raised in a kind of salute to learned helplessness, which we've all experienced before in our classes. He is there trying to figure out and get himself unstuck and trying to figure out what to do next. And designing that deliberately, right? And the last thing, which is we've read a lot of stuff about assessment. And let's be really realistic here. If you're in a home campus situation, having authenticated, not authentic, because you can have authentic assessment, but authenticated assessment, where a parent hasn't helped or where a kid hasn't Googled it or used their mobile phone down here to do some of the answers. If you're looking for authenticated assessment, you're going to be really disappointed in the home campus. So what we're saying is that what we're looking really for is designing for signals of learning growth, reflection, dialogue, and low stakes learning activities, which give us the signals, which allow us to see and to understand learning growth of our individual students. So very much more deliberate design around that rather than potentially doing some kind of standardized authenticated assessment in there.
Nice. So in the 3 minutes that we have left,
What? 3 minutes?
We just want to share just a couple of examples that we would be more than happy to put online for you as well. These design principles and parameters in action. So when we're looking at learning for the joy and the levity and really thinking about you know, some of those equity of access, I wanted to just give a bit of a shout out to our friends from Zoos Victoria, who really took that opportunity to look at animals at home. This was something where they wanted to open up that nature-based experience to anybody, and it absolutely has brought joy and wonder into the mix too. So that's Zoos Victoria. Chris, you've got an example here.
I do. And you know what I didn't check was whether I was sound sharing, but that's okay, I can sing along. What we do have is a wonderful example here from Diamond Creek East Primary School here in Victoria. And we have the principal of the school and one of his teachers having a YouTube channel where they are sharing like this, singing, they're just doing joyous activities, they're talking all about that social and emotional well-being through their reality TV. And Be Happy is very deliberate. So we haven't got time, but I really recommend you go and look up Diamond Creek East's YouTube channel, give them some 1,000 more hits, and look at their work around what Be Happy really means. It's a beautiful, beautiful story.
We've all become reality TV stars, that's for sure. And I love that any space is the learning space on the home campus, like our mate Justin here, who has been able to hack a whiteboard out of his shower. And you can see he's not using anything fancy there. He's just using what is around there to make learning happen as well. Chris, this is this really great model next that you were sharing with us as well, the phases of learning.
Absolutely. And so this is a model that we used at John Monash Science School, which is the school I used to work at, and I've used with lots of other schools. And it is really just an instructional model, but it doesn't have to be seen as a process. What it is trying to pull out the phases and what are the elements or the building blocks of learning that we need. How do we hook kids in? How do we co-design, co-construct outcomes and overview where children are going to be going to in their learning? How do we get input happening? Like that can now be, if we're in a home campus with technology, from anywhere in the world. It doesn't need to be input from me. How do we design for students to construct their own understanding in this space? How are we getting them to demonstrate their learning? And how, most importantly, are we getting them to reflect? Now, we only have 1 minute left, so we're going to go a little bit quick here.
Nice.
Getting technology into the hands of learners. One wonderful school here in Melbourne, who I didn't ask for permission to tell the story, so I'm not going to name the school just yet, but it's a very big school which found out its families, 700 of them didn't have access to technology. So they loaned out Chromebooks. So you could go to the library and loan the Chromebook into your family. So really, really, really powerful use of getting tech into the hands of learners.
Nice. And learner agency is really critical as well. We need to be listening to our students, and schools all over the country have been specifically asking their students about the model of remote learning, and we absolutely encourage you to do that via just surveys here or Flipgrid or something along those lines. So they are our principles of learning. That is our mini design clinic. You can get in touch with us through Twitter. We hang out on the internet there as well. It's been a real pleasure. And we want to make sure that you head into the virtual exhibition marketplace now, where you can see all sorts of great things from our friends at the National Education Summit. 5 seconds, Chris Harte.
Goodbye, thank you. And a massive applause to all teachers.
Woo!
And we're out.
That was so much fun. I don't know if we're still live. I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure. Let's put this out to I'm just gonna put a thingy. Thank you.
We are still live. This is fabulous.
Oh, we are still live?
Yes, we're still live on Zoom.
Oh, maybe we should leave then. Good job. I didn't swear or anything.
Hey everyone, thank you so much. That was so great to have you all along. Chris, I'm totally fine with hanging out for another 5 minutes if people had like questions or wanted to share bits and pieces as well. There's so many cool people doing cool things. Oh my goodness, it's been awesome.
So I just noticed that Lindsay Wesner, who is my good friend from South Africa, is in here on this call as well.
How cool is that?
She is a legend.
So worldwide, Chris Harte, worldwide.
Worldwide. I'm so glad you made it, mate.
That's so good. So good to see all of you, and really a massive shout out. There are people here that are being so generous in sharing. I know that so many of you have had a massive first week back to school, and you're taking the time to hang out with us. So we really appreciate it. So anything that we can do to help share the load, please let us know. But yes, as Chris said, a massive shout out to teachers and leaders. You are doing such a great job.
Julie, yes, I think you can you can access the recording? Yes, I'm sure you can. He says confidently. I'm pretty sure you can, and you'll get a follow-up email from the team at the National Education Summit with the link to that.
Yeah.
And thank you for making it. Yeah,
and a big shout out to Margot and the team from a National Education Summit as well. These guys have done a huge pivot. It's an Australian conference, you know, by an Australian team. So when we can all get back together, I hope that we might be able to do this live face-to-face as well. So thanks, Margot. Thanks, Carly. Thanks, team.